Pac-Man Museum Plus is finally out, and man have I been glued to it everywhere I've been. It's a collection of various games throughout Pac-Man's history, from the 80s through the 90s to the 2000s, and regrettably the 2010s. Many of the games here are maze games, and thus I've already covered a lot of them recently. However, to be brief about the game selection itself, it's not perfect, but considering the mess with @games, it honestly couldn't have been. There are no games from Midway or GCC, so no Miss Pac-Man, there's no Pac-Man 2, so this collection is unfortunately devoid of Smug. There's no Adventures in Time, no Maze Madness, or any of the World games. So if you're looking for every series highlight here, you're not gonna get it. However, if you want a good sampler of the series, including many of those highlights, some of which haven't seen the light of day in over 20 years, you'll be better served here. Pac-Man is just one of those games that's about as close to perfect as you can get. It is an excellently crafted game that's easy to understand but has a ludicrously high skill ceiling, and can challenge players of all skill levels while keeping that challenge fair and giving complete control to the player. One of the best endurance-driven games of all time in all likelihood. Pac-Land, despite being such an early side-scrolling platformer, still manages to be a lot of fun, and aside from some precision-heavy sections that aren't that ideal for the controls and these unspeakable springboard sections, has generally managed to age quite well. Pac-Mania is another really good time, with some really nice presentation to boot, but it does get ridiculous later on. Very fun game, but it might be a good idea to take a break every now and then when you get to the later portions of the game. Pac Attack is a really good puzzle game, but I am nonetheless going to be bummed that it's not the PS1 version because damn, that novice music is too good for this world. No wonder that version takes place in space. Pac-Man Arrangement 96 is a high contender for the best traditional maze game other than the original. Building upon the added stage variety of prior maze sequels and adding not only stage gimmicks, but building off of the core fundamentals in truly excellent ways. This game has only been released twice before in the home market, and both times were in 2001. So yeah, this has been well overdue, and frankly is worth the price alone. Pac-N-Roll Remix is the Wii remake of the Nintendo DS game. It's unfortunately missing content like the entire Ghostland world, as well as all of the cutscenes, which is a real shame because the writing is really cute and charming. It's a kind of prequel to the World games, taking place when Pac-Man was a kid training to be a ghost hunter and facing the ghost for the first time. It wasn't exactly Shakespeare, but it did add a lot of charm to the game. As it stands, this is still fun, and it's nice to see an adventure game from the World era. That said, the new Final World gets intensely annoying. The DS version is definitely better. So at least as far as I'm concerned, those are the highlights. However, while there's far more good than bad here, there still are a few stinkers. Pac-Man Battle Royale honestly feels really underdeveloped, and especially against the CPU, it's pretty boring. It can be fun if the round lasts more than 10 seconds and has a chance to get going, but it's really hinging on that probably more than it should. Pac-in-Time is an interesting inclusion. It's the only Western-developed platformer in this collection, and despite there being plenty of good games in that category, this is often regarded as one of the worst by far, even in comparison to the Game Boy and DOS game that shares its name. Unlike that game, which was a reskin of an Amiga game called, and I swear I'm not kidding, Fury of the Furries, this has different levels and requires you to eat every dot in these compact maze-like levels. A pretty literal translation of the maze formula into a platformer. Not a bad idea, and honestly on paper, Pac-Man is a pretty ideal fit for a Euro platformer. The only problem is that these levels suck. The word I'd use to describe the act of navigating these levels is cumbersome, especially when Pac dots you need to collect are put in ridiculous places that require even more ridiculous solutions. That said, I do get a kick out of it being here. There are things about this game I do like. The tile sets and backgrounds are gorgeous. I like the enemy designs and a lot of the sprite work, the music is good, and the mechanics can be fun to mess around with when the level design takes a break from being absolutely abysmal. This game can be fun when you get a hang of it. The problem is the act of getting a hang of it. Not the worst Pac-Man game in my opinion, but if you want to play a platformer like this, I'd go with Fire and Ice, Super Frog, Rough and Tumble, or basically any good Amiga platformer instead. Hell, play the DOS or Game Boy versions over this. Then there's 256. We'll come back to this one later. What I feel is more important to talk about and what I want to focus more on is what Museum Plus itself brings to the table. Of course, a lot of these games have been re-released a bunch of times, so one might be wondering what's the big deal about this, especially if they have a bunch of the Namco Museum releases, Pac-Man World 2, or happen to have an arcade 1-up cabinet or something. For starters, this uses the Japanese ROMs for all of the games, which to be honest, I have mixed thoughts on. In games like Pac-Land, I am all for it. In cases like Pac-in-Time, it's... oh god. Then in Arrangement... no! No! Rest in peace, funny name. We hardly knew ye. Literally, your description is question marks. Otherwise, not only have some of these games not seen the light of day for a long time, but you have the Virtual Arcade. It's a space you can customize, earn collectibles in, attract NPCs, unlock arcade games in, check leaderboards and missions, etc. This is a lot of the appeal of the collection, and it adds a lot of character to the package. While this doesn't exactly have the most character in the world, it's the most we've seen from this series in ages, and is very much a sight for sore eyes. Unfortunately, some of the other things the game brings to the table are technical issues. I noticed significant input lag both on my lower spec laptop and on the Switch when in docked mode. I've also seen others report similar issues as well. What seemed to fix the issue for me, at least on Switch, was to go into the system settings and set the resolution from 1080p to 720p. Also, while I like the presence of leaderboards, I've repeatedly had issues with my data not matching up with them. Sometimes it can take cartoonishly long for it to update, which while sounding trivial, is the sort of thing that will keep me up all night. Also, while the Virtual Arcade is a really nice feature, I feel like they could have done more with it, and with a few tweaks made it sort of a game in of itself. The biggest thing is while the NPCs arrive to your museum after completing a certain number of missions, once they're there, they don't really do anything other than get in each other's way. I appear to be trapped in a pack of gamers! This is worse than the cage! Also, the furniture and decorations really serve no purpose. Yes, it's cool to be able to customize your arcade layout, but a lot of what you're using doesn't do much other than use space. What if the characters in the arcade were the ones giving you the mission objectives and rewards for completing them? What if by tailoring the layout of your arcade to their desires you attract more of them? Like, what if Clyde's hungry, so you set up tables for him to snack at? Or what if Blinky wants more Battle Royale cabinets, and so on? This is definitely better than just a plain menu, but it doesn't feel like it goes above and beyond with presentation, like even the PS1 Namco Museum games did. I definitely like this, and I like there being other things to do other than play the arcade games, along with more incentives to push yourself while playing them. However, I definitely feel like they could have done more to make it more engaging. Also because of ongoing legal shenanigans brought to you by the delightful chaps who made those demonic-sounding bargain bin Genesis consoles, they've had to redesign and rename a bunch of characters. Miss Pac-Man is unavailable, so they got her non-union Mexican equivalent, and my god is she horrifying. This waking nightmare is called Pac-Mom. This little demon spawn is called Pac-Sis. Pac Jr. is now Pac-Boy, Chomp Chomp is now Pac-Buddy, and Professor Pac is... You fool! You think they could destroy me? For I have collected the golden fruit, and so has my boy! So Professor Pac has survived the purge. Pac Jr. and Chomp Chomp look exactly the same but have assumed new identities through witness protection, but why do the girls have no noses? And what is wrong with their eyes? If you want figures of these atrocities, you use the Gachapon machine, which is cute, but how soon you get all the figures is dependent on RNG, which I'm honestly not a big fan of. At the very least, make it so if you have the max amount of an item, it doesn't come into play. When you get close to having them all at max, you're going to see this message a lot. Furniture and decorations you earn through missions, and if you want duplicates, you get them through the vending machine, which is honestly a far better system for this sort of thing. However, this leads us to the meat of the offerings, the missions. In each game, there are a set of additional objectives. I like this idea of giving more reason to play each game and encourage people to try everything on offer. Most of them are realistic too, and strike a good balance of being engaging without being intrusive. However, then there are some missions like, oh no. Thankfully, most of the games that have these also have pause saves, so you don't need to do them all in one go. There are some missions that are annoyingly grindy, like in Pac-Man Arrangement 05. One of the missions is to complete 50 stages, despite there only being 30 in the game. So even after you beat the game, you're still not done. The missions for Battle Royale can be a bit grindy too, but at the same time it only requires a few playthroughs. It doesn't take that long when you just try to get it done. However, for the most part, the missions are a nice, fun way of adding more meat to the bones, incentivizing exploring the games on offer as opposed to just sticking to the familiar favorites, and pushing players to experiment and improve their skills. Then there's Pac-Man 256. I've covered this game not too long ago, and there I found it unengaging, and I found the power-ups really overpowered. However, that was going back to my save file where I already got all the power-ups and upgraded them. What I forgot to take into account is the process of getting there. Then, with the additional objectives that encourage you to survive, that sort of thing tends to make you more critical of how exactly it is that you're dying. Pac-Man 256 is an endless runner maze game where you're outrunning the 256 glitch because reference. It appears to be taking the maze gameplay and adapting it to be an endless runner, but the more you actually look at it, the less it resembles it. For one, the ghosts do not behave like they did in the classics. They have very simple behavior patterns. Some of them go back and forth on the same plane, sometimes in groups. You have Pinky and Spunky who just sit there until you get close. Pinky will follow you if you line up with the section she's on, and Spunky will follow you until she goes back to sleep. Blinky, on the other hand, is constantly in pursuit. So you have some ghosts who almost behave normally, some who stay in one area just going back and forth in groups, and others who camp. Oh, and it gets better. The mazes are designed in chunks and load in randomly, and don't worry about those pesky rules about maze design like avoid having long stretches or ghosts not being able to turn around other than when switching behavior modes, because they're not here. The maze design is delightfully full of choke points. And when you have a bunch of ghosts who stay in one spot, some who don't, and in a game where the entire concept is based around not going back, all of this combines together into a whimsical journey through the land of goddamn bullshit! You liked having every path blocked off in Pac-Man 99? Good, here's that, but worse. Now you have being cornered before even seeing that you're cornered to contend with. Now you might say, it's an endless runner, so you're going to die at some point, but that doesn't mean the cause of death is okay. So how do you manage to live longer? The answer is quite simple actually. Grinding. Throughout the game you earn power-ups and can pick up coins that give you pitiful amounts of money. Upon completing objectives the game sets for you, you get loot crates that also give you pitiful amounts of money. You can spend this money on upgrades to your power-ups. If you upgrade them all the way, you become an unstoppable hell beast and the game ends up having the exact opposite problem. However, in order to do this, it costs thousands upon thousands of coins per item. But okay, what if I just don't upgrade them all the way, but just most of the way? Yeah, come to think of it, that just might... Fuck! This is where some of the blame has to go to Museum Plus itself. The act of doing this is ridiculous, and it's fair to say that given how long it takes to fully upgrade one power-up, doing the same for 10 is really going overboard. However, the reason I say some, but not all of the blame, is the game is already built around this sort of thing anyway. The game is unapologetically unfair, unless you grind to the point where you can be unfair back. In order to satisfy even more basic objectives, you would have to grind like this anyway. And before you blame Museum Plus for adding objectives, don't forget, 256 already had them. And some people might say, yes, but you don't have to do those in one sitting. And for objectives like collecting fruit or power-ups, yes, that's true. But 256 also asks you to get 128 or 256 pack dot combos, which combined with the long stretches, choke points, and also random gaps in pack dots is quite the tall order without leveling yourself up incessantly. So you just spend hours failing upwards until the game allows you to last more than a minute. Museum Plus didn't create this problem, it just highlighted Museum Plus's mission objectives in of themselves are not asking you to do anything that the games themselves aren't already pushing you towards. The difference here is that 256 progression is agonizingly slow by design. I've heard people call this a time waster. Yeah, a time waster. It wastes time. On one hand, you could say that this was originally a mobile game and that this is par for the course with those. If so, not only is that damning towards mobile games, but also this wasn't the first mobile Pac-Man endless runner. Pac-Man Dash is an endless runner platformer themed after ghostly adventures. Each stage loops, so you gain a sense of familiarity of it, and you're given objectives. However, completing the objective doesn't end the stage. The timer running out does, and you can get more time by eating ghosts, but the longer the stage goes on for, the faster the ghosts get. This means you can overkill objectives and keep the stage going as long as possible, thus increasing the skill ceiling. This was genuinely a good game. So it's not even the stigma of 256 being a mobile game, it's just a really bad game. And the ironic thing is, despite trying to look like the original game, more of that game's strengths carry over to Dash, whereas none of them translate into 256. 256 is Pac-Man made by people who don't understand why Pac-Man worked. If it feels like my discussion of the missions was disproportionately centered around one game, that's because the same applies to completing the missions themselves. It took longer to grind my way through getting 256's missions than those for every other game combined. You see this image? You wanna know how many missions I completed in this session? None. When it was announced that this game was going to be in here, I thought, sure, I don't like this game, but there's so many other games here that I actually do like that I don't care. However, with how Museum Plus is structured, this game being here actively makes the collection worse. I'm not a fan of Battle Royale either, but it's a harmless inclusion. This, on the other hand, was by far one of the worst 100% quests I have ever played in a Pac-Man game, and that's saying something. I have 100% completed Pac-Man Fever, and I have all of the trading cards in Pac-Man World 3. I need help. However, when I got that golden pass, and that sunk cost fallacy went away, just leaving me with a selection of games I really like and a cute customizable arcade, I really went back to having fun again. Overall, this is a genuinely good collection. Unfortunately, it's easy to lose perspective of that when trying to go for 100% because of one game in particular, and it's easy to think about the what ifs. However, there's a lot of fun to be had here. If you've never played much of the series before, this is a pretty good starting point, especially with it only being $20. That said, what I'm the happiest about with this collection is seeing Bandai Namco actually putting effort into this series again. Not only with the collection, but also all of the promotion surrounding it. Seeing them pay tribute to the series as a whole this passionately is something I thought I would never see. It's really crazy to see something like this when beforehand, the last game in the series I can unambiguously call good was Ghostly Adventures 2 in 2014, and everything after that has been some version of fundamentally broken or unplayable. This is probably the biggest recovery the series has ever made. I just hope they keep it up this time, but this does inspire confidence and hope that this is a launching point for something even greater going forward. Special thanks to the Sidequestian Gentleman and Mario123311 for supporting me on Patreon. You guys are awesome.